Hello everyone! Recently Fantasy Flight Games gave us a first impression of Jessica Jones' hero deck, and I liked what they showed us there so much that I just have to talk about it. In this video, however, I won't be going over all the cards that were shown there, but only the ones that are especially interesting to me. If you haven't read the article yourself yet, then you should definitely do so after this video. I won't be looking at the individual cards in a vacuum, but directly in the context of two possible archetypes. First, I talk about the new alternative win condition that Jessica Jones introduces to the game, and after that I talk about the approach of a deck that I'm spontaneously calling Switch and Ready. At the end, I'll briefly talk about the potential of sidekick for Jessica Jones and Luke Cage. But alright, enough introduction. What does Jessica Jones actually do? As you've already been able to read the whole time, the text box on Jessica's alter ego site splits into two parts. For now, we are only interested in the second half. It says that during setup, you put the support alias investigations into play. This is the card that enables the new alternative win condition. Let's take a look at it. It's a support with a permanent keyword, so it cannot leave play under any circumstances. It has a responsibility. After you defeat a side scheme, you can exhaust alias investigations. If you do, you place 2 evidence counters on the card. After that, you can remove as many evidence counters from this card as the villain has remaining hit points in order to defeat the current villain stage. And with that, we have a new alternative win condition, at least for scenarios that you win by defeating the final stage of the villain. So, with alias investigations, we can now defeat the villain without having dealt even a single point of damage to them. I think that's pretty cool. And what I find even cooler, with this effect you can even get around some restrictions. Let's take a look, for example, at the second stage of the leader Iron Man. As soon as he is revealed, he cannot take damage for the rest of the phase. He very likely has this ability because it's common to basically skip the harder second stage of a villain by building up during the easier first stage, then pushing the villain into the final stage within one round and defeating them completely right away. This tactic is not possible against Iron Man, for example, but alias investigations gets around this restriction, since it does not deal damage to the villain. So Jessica Jones can still defeat Iron Man in the same round in which she pushed him into the second villain stage. All she needs for that are enough evidence counters and alias investigations, meaning 16 of them. Although that's not entirely true. As I said, alias investigations can only be activated after you have defeated a side scheme. No side scheme, no alternate win condition. That means you have to guarantee that, at the right moment, there's a side scheme in play that you can defeat. The best way to do that is, of course, with player side schemes, since they usually don't have negative effects for the players while they are in play. Luckily, Jessica Jones brings a player side scheme herself, namely piecing it all together. Whoever completes this player side scheme draws 3 cards. What's worth mentioning is that this card does not have the victory keyword. That means that after it has been completed, the card goes into Jessica Jones' player's discard pile and not into the victory display. Almost all player side schemes have the victory keyword, which is why it is not guaranteed at all that you have a player side scheme in play at the right time, since once they are completed, they are removed from the game. Besides piecing it all together, there are only 2 other player side schemes without the victory keyword, namely the identity-specific player side schemes of Jubilee and Silk. If you're playing co-op, then you can definitely factor that into your considerations, because alias investigations does not require the Jessica Jones player themselves to defeat a side scheme. Any player can do that. So, we would like to have a side scheme in play and ideally a player side scheme. How do we guarantee that in the best way? For this, Fantasy Flight Games has also shown a new card from the Justice aspect. Strategy Session is an event that costs 1 resource and enables 2 different actions, depending on whether you are in alter ego or hero form. Here, we are only interested in the alter ego action. It says that you may choose a player to search their deck for a player side scheme to add it to their hand. In and of itself, this is a good card, but of course it can whiff if all player side schemes are already in the discard pile. But there's another alternative, namely the Ally Manifold, also in the Justice aspect. He costs 3 resources but lets you choose a player who searches both the deck and the discard pile for a player side scheme to add to their hand. Clearly a better ability, but also significantly more expensive. The last card I want to mention here does not bring a player side scheme into play, but one from the encounter deck. One way or another, it's a free event that lets you choose and reveal a side scheme from the encounter deck. If that succeeds, you also draw 3 cards. Of course, this card can also whiff, but usually it doesn't. In any case, we can say that in the Justice aspect we can control pretty well that there's a side scheme in play when we need one in order to end the game with alias investigations. Other aspects are more dependent on luck here, or probably have to include more player side schemes in the deck. Alright, now we know how to get side schemes into play. The question that remains is how we collect enough evidence counters to defeat the villain, ideally while they are still at full health. For that, we finally take a look at Jessica Jones' hero form, and more specifically at her textbooks. Contains a responsibility that says that whenever you use one of her basic powers, you place an evidence counter on alias investigations. That means that, per round, you most likely place at least one evidence counter on the card. Of course, that's not enough. You can speed the whole thing up by readying Jessica Jones again within a round in order to use her basic powers multiple times. Jessica gets another way to increase efficiency through the upgrade Leather Jacket. This not only gives her plus to defense, but also has the responsibility that whenever you defend, you place an evidence counter on alias investigations. Unlike the response on the hero card, this does not have to be a defense using a basic power. Defense events also trigger this ability. If you combine all of that with a card like Desperate Defense or Indomitable, then you can easily collect 4 evidence counters in one round. But there are also offensive ways to collect more counters. The upgrade Circumstantial Evidence is an upgrade that costs 1 resource and can be exhausted when an enemy is defeated. If you do that, you have to place an evidence counter on alias investigations. So you can imagine aggression decks in which you use cards like Spoiling for a Fight to make sure there are minions in play. The fact that the card also readies Jessica Jones is of course a nice bonus. The event Big Mistake can be used both to attack the villain directly or to defeat minions in order to trigger Circumstantial Evidence. This event is an attack and deals 3 damage to an enemy. You can then spend an evidence counter to deal 2 additional damage to that enemy and give the attack either overkill or piercing. Since you only have to remove as many evidence counters as the villain has remaining hit points, you definitely come out ahead. The same cannot necessarily be said about Spoiling for a Fight. If there are big minions with guard in the counter deck, then in the end you probably come out worse than if you hadn't played the event, even if you increase Jessica Jones' attack value. It gets even worse if the minion also has toughness. In scenarios with minions like that, you should therefore think carefully about whether you want to play this event or not. The final 2 cards that generate evidence counters do so in connection with thwarting. With snooping around, you can, in Alter Ego, remove 4 threat from a scheme for 0 resources and place 2 evidence counters on alias investigations. After that, you have to discard the top card of the encounter deck. If that card is a minion or a side scheme, it is revealed. I think that despite this downside, this is an extremely strong card. Sure, there can be situations where the revealed card makes your life difficult, but I don't think that will be the common outcome. Stakeout is an upgrade that you can attach to a side scheme that is not permanent, meaning that can be defeated. It has to be a side scheme from the encounter deck, so you cannot attach the card to player side schemes. When a character thwarts that side scheme, 2 additional threat are removed from it. And as soon as the side scheme is defeated by thwarting, you place 2 evidence counters on alias investigations. That means Jessica Jones can remove 5 threat from a side scheme that has stakeout attached to it with a single activation of her basic power. Especially in solo, that is very impressive. Those are all cards that we know so far that help generate additional evidence counters. I can imagine that among the cards that have not yet been revealed, there may be more of them. But I actually believe the opposite is more likely, and that there will be more cards that use evidence counters. We already looked at Big Mistake. Also revealed were Calling in Favors and 4K Digital Camcorder. The former lets you play an ally from your deck for 2 evidence counters as if they have been played from your hand. That alone would already be strong, but 2 factors make the card almost unfair. First, the ally's cost is reduced by 2, and second, Calling in Favors is not an event, but a support. So you can basically use the effect every round. As we see in a moment, it's actually no problem at all for Jessica Jones to activate this effect every round, but we'll get to that in a moment. 4K Digital Camcorder lets us remove a non-elite minion from play, as long as we remove 2 fewer evidence counters from alias investigations than the minion has remaining hit points. That means minions with 1 or 2 hit points can be removed for free. This card can, for example, help soften bad activations of Spoiling for a Fight. Sure, if you want to win the game with the alternate win condition, then you don't want to use these 2 cards too often. But the fact that they are there when you do need them should definitely not be underestimated. In any case, I'm very excited to see how a deck plays that focuses on accumulating evidence counters, because during the first phase of the game you collect the counters as byproduct of actions you want to take anyway. If you then occasionally focus a bit more deliberately on collecting additional counters, I can well imagine that when transitioning into the second villain stage, you either already have enough evidence collected to end the game immediately, or you are at least very close. In multiplayer games it probably looks a bit different, since the villain does gain quite a lot of additional hit points there. But I still think Jessica will be fun there as well. Alright, that was the first strategy I wanted to shed some light on. The second one is a set I'm calling Switch and Ready. What's behind this name is actually very simple, and we see the first half of it directly when we look again at the text box on Jessica's alter ego side. There we find an action. With this action you may switch to hero form. If you do, however, you may not switch back to alter ego in the same phase. That means you cannot start the round in alter ego, switch to hero mode using the action, and then use the one free form change per round to end the round back in alter ego. But you can use the ability to start the round in hero mode, use a free change to switch to alter ego, and then from there switch back to hero mode using the action. I've been waiting for an ability like that for a long time. At first glance, this ability might not look like a big deal, but it's easy to show that it very much is. Just take another look at snooping around. It's an alter ego action. Since Jessica Jones can be an alter ego every round, we can also play the card every round. We can also, in a round, switch to alter ego, heal ourselves using our basic power, and switch back to hero form again. Then there are numerous scenarios in which the enemy showers us with obligations or attachments that we can only get rid of in alter ego. Think, for example, of the various attachments from Enchantress. With Jessica Jones, you can quickly switch to alter ego at any time without being stuck there until the next round. While we are at it, let's look at a few more cards that benefit from being able to switch to alter ego every round. First we have Crew Quarters, a card that can basically heal us for one hit point every round and only gets better in multiplayer. Hall of Heroes is a card that I usually find very clunky. You can only play the card in a deck that is designed to summon lots of minions. But in such a deck, you can rarely afford to end a round in alter ego in order to draw 3 cards on the next turn. With Jessica Jones, you don't have to wait around and can draw the 3 cards immediately. I can well imagine that this makes the card noticeably better. The same is true to some extent for Hidden Base, although I already think that card is strong as is, especially if you also have Ready for a Fight in play. With Jessica Jones, however, you no longer need the latter to prevent the villain from advancing the scheme. Those were just 3 cards that noticeably benefit from Jessica Jones being able to switch to alter ego every round, but of course there are more. Beyond that, there are at least just as many, probably even more cards that benefit from you being able to switch from alter ego to hero form every round. Obvious candidates for this are Moxie, Lay Down the Law, and Surprise Attack. The last 2 are each very efficient events, whether for thwarting or for dealing damage, and one should not overlook the fact that these 2 cards are not limited to main schemes and villains, but can also target side schemes and minions, so they are not only cost efficient but also flexible. Thanks to Moxie, Jessica Jones gets truly impressive stats, especially when you consider that with the help of the leather jacket she already has 3 defense anyway. But what really makes Moxie good for Jessica Jones is the second part in the name of the strategy, the ready and switch and ready. Because Jessica Jones can not only switch back and forth between her forms every round, she also has a strong interest in being readied by card effects. We already looked at that earlier, for example when we considered Desperate Defense and Spoiling for a Fight. The responsibility in a hero form practically invites you to activate multiple times in one round. Sure, I can't play Moxie and one of the cards just mentioned, since they belong to different aspects, but luckily Jessica brings her own in-house card, namely in the form of Breakthrough. This, once again, is an event with a responsibility that can be triggered when you place at least 1 evidence counter on alias investigations. If you do, you can ready your identity. Afterwards, you shuffle Breakthrough back into your deck. Since you generate an evidence counter whenever you use the basic power of Jessica Jones' hero form, you can basically guarantee the activation of this free event. Here, we also see a synergy between the ability to switch forms every round and having cards that ready your identity. Moxie benefits from both. I'm sure that really cool and unique decks can be built here, and I'm already looking forward to diving deeper into that. You also shouldn't forget that along the way, you are generating evidence counters the whole time, which you can use to activate powerful effects. I'm already excited. Another strategy that can be combined wonderfully with Switch and Ready is Sidekick. On the one hand, because you have to heal with your basic power in order to heal your sidekick, and on the other hand, because Side by Side simply fits wonderfully into the concept of readying your identity multiple times in one round. You can see that everything really interlocks here. This is then rounded off by the fact that Luke Cage is genuinely a good candidate for Sidekick. He can only activate his ability every other round, since he has to be exhausted in order to become tough, which doesn't work if you're already exhausted because he defended an attack. But even every other round, 1 defense is already enough. If you take into account, however, that there are numerous cards that can ready an ally multiple times in one round, you can also quickly build a deck in which you can defend much more regularly than just every other round. But alright, that's it from me for now. As you hopefully can see, I'm really looking forward to Jessica Jones and can't wait to get my hands on the cards. If you're interested in hearing my thoughts on the rest of the wave, then let me know. I really like Daredevil and Echo also. The whole wave seems like it's going to be really good so far, but that's a topic for another video. For now, I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'm looking forward to welcoming you back in the next video. Take care.